Okay, I'm back. It's been a long time. So it's been like 10 days since I've recorded any videos. All I can say is real life is overwhelming me. I have a new feature on this channel. They gave me a community option of a community page, I guess because I have several hundred subscribers, a few hundred subscribers now. I really thank y'all for doing that, for subscribing. So please do that if you haven't done that and you're watching this. Please like and subscribe. I got to fight the algorithms of YouTube. So I know I put up a little thing that I hadn't posted in 10 days, and I also posted a little teaser for the review I'm about to do. It's this funny panel from a very ancient comic book, which I had read many years ago, reprint of. But the panel was forwarded to me by my buddy Tim Tolbert, and permanent channel patron and collaborator, and it was kind of, in his words, summing up the politics of the film Wakanda Forever, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. So that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm going to start knocking these videos out over the next few days. I worked like 6 days in a row. I finally have a reprieve from the day job. Thursday, I have to run a ton of errands, health related and other things, and mail out the scant couple of eBay orders. Speaking of eBay, I've got stuff on eBay if you want to buy it. These are $35 each. These beautiful guys, Rocket J Squirrel, and my neighbor Tortoro. I'm debating selling this blaxploitation calendar. You see the Disco Godfather of the Disco. This is Rudy Ray Moore at his very best. Well, maybe not his very best, but Rudy Ray Moore. And Carol Speed, who's just, a goddess. So I used to know her. I used to talk to her all the time on MySpace. I don't know what's become of her. So this is like a calendar. So obviously it's already dated. I can't remember what year it was for. Maybe 2017, 2018. I got this super cheap on Amazon. I thought it was going to be something a little different than it was, but it's kind of cool. I haven't turned to Disco Godfather, but I always have to have like some blaxploitation graphics around it. It inspires me because it's one of my favorite, if you want to call it a genre. Petey Wheatstraw, Devil's Son-in-Law, which I think is the best Rudy Ray Moore movie, the best made and the most interesting. And then there's Dolomite. So they're kind of on a theme here for a few months in a row. You got Dolomite. Big Time. This was kind of a really obscure one. I didn't finish watching it. It was on YouTube. And I want to say that John Daniels from Black Shampoo was in it. I can't recall. And there was these, Sidney Poitier and Bill Cosby series where they played the same characters, Uptown Saturday Night, and A Piece of the Action, and Let's Do It Again. Now what's this one? This is The Monkey Hustle. This is the only Hollywood movie that Rudy Ray Moore was ever in, with the late great Yaphet Kotto. Both these gentlemen are no longer walking the earth, and the earth is poorer for it. And the Mac, I think I had this up one time when I was doing a video. Come Back Charleston Blue, and The Hitter, which was a very obscure one with Ron O'Neal, who was in Superfly. I love it. It's great. I finally got a good copy of that from Redlist.com. So that's a fun cat. I mean, obviously it's really kind of limited in scope, but that's okay. And I'm thinking about selling the Star Sapphire, whatever you want to call her. I don't know if I'd call her an action figure, a statue. She doesn't lend herself to much action. She's not very stable on this thing either. And these like high heel pumps aren't really helping. So anyway, she's a character from Silver Age, Green Lantern. She was like Hal Jordan, Green Lantern's arch foe. Sometimes different people had this persona. One was his girlfriend, Carol Ferris, and I guess she didn't remember she was evil. DC did that shit a lot. Also, there was another woman, a French girl, and that's why I bought this, because I love the French woman. I can't remember her name, was Camille. But anyway, she was the second Star Sapphire, and she was one of the key members The Secret Society of Supervillains, which came out in the 70s. One of my favorite DC 70s comics. One of the few I actually collected while it was current, because I didn't collect much DC. And when I did start, I kind of wouldn't stick with it for long. I was a Marvel nut. But I had my little periods. So I have a collection of the whole Secret Society of Supervillains trade paperback. So then when I saw this on eBay for like $5 or something, I was like, or 10, I'm like, hell yeah. I'm going to try to sell it for 20. I doubt it'll go. I'll probably end up going for 10. I may not sell it. Let me know what you think. Should I sell this or not? She's really cool. So anyway, let's get down to it. Wakanda Forever 2022 by Ryan Coogler, co-written and directed by Ryan. Oh my God, don't let my attacking me. Ryan Coogler, who directed the Black Panther. So this is the movie that it seemed like maybe couldn't or shouldn't be made after Chadwick Boseman died tragically around early 40s of colon cancer a couple of years ago. And he had been so thorough about hiding his condition. No one in the industry knew he was dying of colon cancer. I mean, he wasn't necessarily diagnosed as dying right away. Probably his family knew, and that's probably it. Because it didn't get leaked. You know, it was tighter than the David Lynch non-disclosure agreement signed for Twin Peaks: The Return. No one knew a thing until it happened. It's kind of like Freddie Mercury many years ago announced to the world, "Oh, I've got AIDS. I might be gay, really, after all." And the next day he died. I don't know. He timed that well, but you know, Freddie had he was in touch with something, you know, creatively that few people are. I think he just happened to be able to parlay it into a huge commercial success. But I would consider Queen to be a overall pretty progressive band, and a pop band, and a metal band, and whatever you want to call them, a funky band. Like anyway, so you know, it's like, do we do another Black Panther movie without Chadwick Boseman? Do we kill off T'Challa? And Kevin Feige, who's the Feige, whatever, the main Marvel guru, you know, he was like, it's just too soon to think about. Does that mean that they'll do it in the future? I figure there's some little seeds planted in this movie that maybe not intentionally, but there's a few little open maybe doors or cracks where you could recast T'Challa and have him come back from the dead somehow or another, because you never see his body. Of course, they could have CGI'd his body, but I guess that would be disrespectful to Boseman. And in the scenes where there's contact with the metaphysical astral plane of the ancestors, as depicted in the first Black Panther movie, where he makes contact, T'Challa, and also Killmonger. Because the sacred herbs, they give you this psychedelic trip, you know, but you literally do meet the spirit of your forebears. That happens in this movie. Shuri, T'Challa's sister, does it, and she doesn't meet T'Challa, and there's really no T'Challa afterlife thing, even though, you know, he himself, the character, said in Civil War, Captain America Civil War, about T'Chaka, and this is his father, and this is reiterated in the film Black Panther, that, you know, death is not, you know, it's not the end for us, it's like a stepping stone. And it's insanely horribly ironic and kind of sad and tragic and surreal that he dies in real life, and then they never show him on screen because they don't, you know, they haven't got anything shot. They do 2 sequences of Chadwick Boseman and one of his image. His image is, there's a painting of T'Challa on this, I don't call it a bulletin board in Wakanda, I don't know what, side of a building. Like, hey, this is T'Challa, rest in peace, and it's in the language, the written language that they use for the Wakandan language. I think it's based on a real African written language, but I don't remember the name of it. So in the beginning credits, when they do the Marvel crawl and Marvel pops up, the word Marvel, and you know, they go through panels of either panels of the comic book or images from the first three phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Instead, they only do scenes of Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa from the four films that he was featured in, which is Civil War, Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame, and The Black Panther, which came out and took place in between Civil War and Infinity War. A lot of war going on. And that's it. And that's all he made. And most of the time that's T'Challa, he knew he had colon cancer. And the scenes of him in Endgame, some fans at the time were like, he's looking really thin, man. Is he okay? And his publicists and MCU publicists, whoever does all the publicity, no, he's fine. And then nobody, except maybe a few really wackos on Reddit who were like, how those guys like you're chomping at the bit for some kind of dirt, it's fan bros who always slag. I have to slag them in every comic related video. I love it because they're such easy targets and such mean, horrible people. So nobody really thought deeply about it, and then he dies, and it's like he had colon cancer for 3 or 4 years, diagnosed. So he may have known he had it when he got the role of T'Challa, or he may have found out shortly after he secured the role of T'Challa. I get that time frame a little mixed up based on what I've read and what Boseman's estate or family or friends or whoever, agents, managers, whoever that handles news on Chadwick Boseman and his career, have kind of cited the year in which he was diagnosed. So it's really my faulty memory here, but it was a little vague initially. It's probably been more filled in now. I haven't delved deeply into it. So, it's kind of weird. He may have accepted the role knowing that he could be fatally ill. But what I'm saying is by Endgame, he was looking thin, but he still was pretty ripped. And he still did a lot of parts of his stunts. Now, a lot of them are CGI. And they're probably going to be anyway. And I have to say the Black Panther, the climactic battle between him and Eric Killmonger, the CGI is kind of weak. Sometimes Marvel rushes that shit in the third act and gets this frantic. And Black Panther suffered. There's also a sequence where he's riding these rhinoceri, which is very evocative of panels from Don McGregor's run on Jungle Action featuring the Black Panther from the 1970s. And especially, I think, Gil Kane. If I remember correctly, Gil Kane and Klaus Janson illustrate a story where he's riding either a rhinoceros or maybe even like a triceratops or some, because there are dinosaurs, living dinosaurs in part of the Wakandas in the comics. So like Wakanda and the Savage Land, we could talk about all that. But anyway, they haven't indicated that they're definitely going to include the Savage Land. In the comic books, the Savage Land is the only other place on Earth that has vibranium besides Wakanda. But it's a different kind of vibranium, and it's kind of an anti-metal. They did show the Savage Land in a kind of quick Easter egg shot in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. But there's no indication that it's going to be followed up. There's no official confirmation that is on MCU, Earth 616, the primary Earth, or somewhere else. Because Doctor Strange and America Ferrera, that's the actress, America Chavez, the character, are tripping through the realities, as I like to say. They almost bump into the living tribunal. And that's definitely him. And see, he's kind of a being that exists outside of all the multiverse. So he's confirmed as a character, which is cool. But anyway, so what they've done is, instead of exploring the Savage Land vibranium, they've decided that there is one other place on Earth where there is vibranium, and they explain it very nicely. And it is this place called Talocan, which is based off of Aztec mythology and Mesoamerican culture. And essentially, Talocan is Atlantis. So they've left a lot of things open enough to where you can either try to interpret it literally. You know, I'm not one of the literalists, as I call them, with a capital L, and go, well, it's strictly some Mesoamericans who were massacred by the Spanish, and they fled, and somehow they got underwater, and somehow they were able to breathe underwater, and they mutated, and then eventually one of them mated with a regular modern human Hispanic person, and here comes Namor, their king. The ones that live underwater are blue underwater and can breathe underwater. When they're on, I'm sorry, underwater they can breathe underwater, and they are still flesh colored, Hispanic, kind of brown flesh. When they go to the surface, they have to use the things with oxygen around their muzzle here, kind of like the COVID masks, to breathe air, and that's perfectly in line with the Submariner lore from the comic books. Namor is the Submariner. We'll get into him in a sec, more detail specifically on him. But when they're on the surface world, they're blue. Their skin turns blue. But when they're underwater, they have their original skin color. It's kind of weird. So, but Namor can breathe underwater or on the air, and he can fly because he's a mutant. He has wings on his ankles. This is all very faithful to the comics. I think Namor, as done in this movie, is kind of a revelation. He's really a character that needed to be in the MCU, and I think they were really trying to figure out how to do it, especially since Aquaman was a huge, gigantic, successful film, and that now is everyone's association with a superhero from Atlantis, which is really unfortunate because Submariner came a few years before Aquaman in publication history. Now, admittedly, Aquaman's realm was confirmed on panel, comic panel, in print as being Atlantis before Namor's was officially called Atlantis. So you could argue that Marvel copied Aquaman in naming it Atlantis. But as far as a defined Atlantis with a defined rich mythology, Marvel began, Bill Everett had already developed a lot of it. But in the 60s, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Roy Thomas began seriously developing that mythology at a much faster pace than Aquaman's Atlantean background was being developed. And then in the 70s, Bill Everett even came back to Submariner. Steve Gerber wrote Submariner for a while and did the Tales of Atlantis and the whole sinking, which he also tied in to this kind of, this multi-tiered tie-in with Submariner comics that he wrote and the Son of Satan, and also with Man-Thing. So he had this kind of mythology. He used to spread his personal corner across all of his books that he wrote, like the ones I named, as well as Howard the Duck, Daredevil, Marvel 2-in-1, Omega the Unknown, and of course the Defenders, his commercially biggest success with Marvel. Truly beautiful. To give Gerber that corner, I wish someone would do a couple of giant books, like omnibuses of Steve Gerber's Marvel work, like all of it. Not just the Man-Thing, but like the Defender. I mean, it had to be like 5 volumes, but I mean, it'd be so rich and beautiful, and you could just read and jump around and see all the interconnections. So, I mean, I'm mentioning this because, like I said, Steve Gerber had such an impact on Marvel's mythology and is really not given enough credit even to this day. And I run a Steve Gerber group, the first public Steve Gerber group on Facebook, and the largest one. There's only one other. But this one came first. I didn't make it. I inherited it. I own it, called Steve Gerber RIP, because I inherited it, sadly, right around the time he passed away. He is my favorite comic book writer of all time, and he's in my top 3 or 4 favorite writers of all time. I talk about him a lot on this channel because I think he needs more props, and unfortunately there are a lot of continuations of his work, or riffs on his work, or pastiches on his work, or adaptations of his work, primarily iterations of Howard the Duck, that really sully his legacy, his work. People begin to associate that, let's be frank, that garbage, that excrement with Steve Gerber, and he has nothing to do with that crap, and that literal crap. And Anyway, but what I'm saying is he contributed a good deal to Submariner's mythology. And Bill Everett came back into his character and wrote and illustrated till he died. After that, Submariner didn't have a solo book for a long time. So anyway, this is the stuff I grew up on. By the time Namor had another solo book, it was like the end of the 80s, early 90s. I was about to stop collecting Marvel altogether. I didn't like John Byrne, who wrote and drew the comic, and I just didn't care. So I did like Jay Lee's art on it when he started out, and he developed into a brilliant fucking talent and did incredible work like the Inhumans, Marvel Knights miniseries, which is collected in what I consider an essential graphic novel. Really, the Inhumans deserves to be the next frontier that they explore, that expands this kind of Marvel mythology, most of which was instigated by Jack Kirby, just from his brain, a lot from Ditko. Not so much Submariner. Submariner is really a Bill Everett creation, but Kirby, Lee, and Roy Thomas, Steve Gerber, etc., expanded on it. So this film captures Namor, Prince Namor the Submariner, as the prince. He's almost considered like a god. I think it's because he is a mutant. They never use the M word, just like they didn't directly call Ms. Marvel a mutant in her final episode, where they used the word mutation. And Professor Charles Xavier is obviously a mutant, but they never actually called him a mutant in his wonderful role. You'll call it a supporting role or an extended cameo in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which I reviewed on this channel also. And people, it's kind of a long review, one of my epic links, and it's only got like 100 views. Check it out though, if you're into this stuff, because I think it's pretty good. It's a lot of detail, a lot of facts. I'm hoping this one won't run over an hour. I'm gonna be determined not to run over an hour. So as usual, I've kind of drifted all around, but my point being is that what were they going to do with this concept now that the pivot point, the character T'Challa, the Black Panther, was dead? So of course, Black Panther is a legacy character, though T'Challa is the most well-known and most utilized iteration, and he was the first ever depicted. And there have been others in flashbacks or in other kinds of ways shown, like T'Chaka, his father was a Black Panther at one time. This was shown in the comics and in the film. In the film Black Panther, in the prologue, T'Chaka is depicted in the year, I think, 1990 as the Black Panther. And actually his costume as the Black Panther is the most comic accurate one. It's even more beautiful than the costume T'Challa wore as Black Panther in Captain America Civil War. I kind of feel like the way they slimmed him down and streamlined him and everything in the Black Panther movie and onward. Not the first scene. The first scene he had the same costume as in Civil War. Then they gave him kind of this nanotechnology, Stark-like costume. I don't really care for those costumes. He wore that stuff all the way through those two Avengers films, Infinity War and Endgame. Don't really care for those, but that's him. He looked okay, but I think he looked incredible the way they had him in Civil War and the opening scene of Black Panther. So, and also the way his father, T'Chaka, his costume was just amazing. And there's been other Black Panthers going all the way to their ancestor Bashinga, who lived thousands of years ago and was basically blessed by Bast, the Egyptian cat goddess. They go into all this in the beginning of the film Black Panther. They do this kind of CGI, obviously CGI heavy, not meant to look realistic thing. That's all based on the Jack Kirby mythology, the landing of the creation of vibranium, the discovery of vibranium via an asteroid that plummeted to Earth thousands of years ago. And then the worship of Bast. And then the community of Wakanda forming around mining the vibranium and the creation, harvesting of the heart-shaped herbs, which in the comics were a creation of Roy Thomas. He created a more developed origin for T'Challa in Avengers number 87, like 1970, 71. Kirby had never gotten into that so much. Roy Thomas was kind of the go-to guy after Stan Lee in Marvel for many years. And so he inherited a lot of these titles from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and develop them. So a lot of the Black Panther development did not happen under Jack Kirby and with Stan Lee sometimes, arguably, but later in the pages of the Avengers written by Roy Thomas. And for about 40 issues, he developed T'Challa and culminated, 35 issues to be exact. And he culminated in this origin of what the deal was with T'Challa, and they got into all that. It was just not because all Kirby had really shown you as a kid, King T'Chaka was killed by Claw. Now in the Black Panther film and the Civil War film, they changed it to where the Winter Soldier the Winter Soldier was allegedly the murderer of T'Chaka at the UN, but actually it was Baron Helmut Zemo. And then they kind of spun off the idea in the Black Panther film that the fate that happened to young T'Challa in the comic books was suffered by his best friend W'Kabi. So W'Kabi's village and father were killed by Claw. So there's still a Claw connection because Claw had the vibranium. And he created a vibranium arm after Ultron, who was composed a lot of vibranium himself, cut his arm off. And in the comic books, I think somebody blasted Claw's hand off. It might have been T'Challa as a kid. Somebody blasted his hand off after he killed T'Chaka. Years later, he turned into a being of pure sonic energy. I mean, not that many years later. I mean, years later, as in from T'Challa's childhood. In the comics, just, a couple issues later. And he's been that way ever since. Now, in the films, he never got to that point. I'm pretty sure he died in the Black Panther film. Correct. But anyway, he had a link to Killmonger, and that was in the comic books too. So, how do you follow the Black Panther? This was until Spider-Man No Way Home, this was the biggest solo superhero film ever made. $1.3 billion worldwide. No Batman movie or Spider-Man movie, much less any others, could even touch this thing. And it shocked everybody, but it was like a global phenomenon because it was essentially, it was a matter of, these terms that are used a lot by neoliberals in a self-congratulatory fashion, which they, which some people derisively call a woke attitude. But that woke was borrowed from black leftist culture. Woke was a compliment during the Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016. If you were woke, then you were actually awake. You knew what was going on. You knew the real deal. And you were on the left, and you were for revolution and change and positive transformation. Now, if someone says you're woke, it's an insult saying you're like a virtue signaling liberal. The problem is the people who call themselves liberal now, who are very right wing, they play into this. And so they kind of invite this criticism. And what it does is it cheapens the original meaning of the word woke. And it cheapens any validity to the very real things that are positive. Even though people like the Democrats, callously and crassly, cynically campaign on these things with empty promises to help disenfranchised people. There are people who do believe in, LGBT rights, trans rights, women's rights, gay rights, black rights, rights of all humans, rights to have health care as a human right, etc. So opponents of the
racists, ultra conservatives of both major American political parties, derisively called Black Panther a woke film. But, using their own terminology against them, it did supply things like visibility and representation. Those are terms they use a lot. So I think they use it poorly because they'll say things like, Kamala Harris, the first black/female/Indian vice president. That's representation. It's like, no, that's not what it is, really. You may feel that way. The Black Panther film actually was representation because these were characters that were not part of the American mainstream. They weren't American. They were black, but they were African. They were not African American. Arguably, Eric Killmonger was African American, but of African, birth. Um, Wakanda is like an Afrofuturist paradise. It is a wish fulfillment, a dream fulfillment. And I think it has resonated worldwide with blacks and other minorities and even weird misfits like me. Basically, kind of the way the X-Men resonated with a lot of people who felt different or weird or outcast. I think what this has done is created the people who were racially discriminated against and oppressed by white imperialism worldwide, be it colonial British imperialism or modern American capitalist imperialism. And it is a vision where they're like, no, we've always existed. We've been in secret, but we've been here and we did this shit before you. Our science is greater. Our culture is richer and deeper and older. And that's the kind of stuff that a lot of black leader, visionary kind of people of all different kinds of political ends of the political spectrum, from Marcus Garvey down to Louis Farrakhan, have been preaching for many years. That we should be proud of our roots. We don't belong in America. We were stolen, we were raped, our culture was pillaged. All true. See, that didn't happen to Wakanda, but that also sets up the key conflict in the Black Panther film, is that Eric Killmonger is saying, look at you, you've had this. We suffered. All of our black brothers and sisters and brown brothers and sisters worldwide have suffered and been enslaved, and y'all did. And he says it, and because Eric Killmonger uses a lot of kind of, slang, black American slang, and he's like, y'all did nothing. And so that's a legitimate argument. It's where the villain, much like Magneto in the X-Men, has a legitimate ideological claim. Now, the way he carries out how he feels that ideology should be realized materially could be considered to be horrible and cruel. But it's a fictional story. So you can sympathize with characters like Magneto or Killmonger, even though they are murderers and they will do whatever they need to. And both of them evoke Malcolm X's thing about by any means necessary. Though Malcolm X never actually participated in any violence. That's kind of one of those myths. The Black Panther Party never participated in violence either, except as self-defense, usually against policemen. And usually they didn't survive. See Fred Hampton, for instance, young Fred Hampton, who's now become a hero, who died at 21, 22, and he's still remembered and more influential now, 50 years after his death almost, than when he was alive. This is the power of symbolism and legend, and this is what, to me, Wakanda represents to people. Wakanda Forever, this is like Brotherhood. That great I almost felt like crying doing that. The scene where T'Challa's walking down the hall and he greets his sister and he's wearing this incredible long black dashiki-like robe, and he does that thing for the first time. First time you see it, second time you see it, the 20th time you see it, it gives me a lump in the throat, man. It's like, because that's the brotherhood that I feel with disenfranchised people that are on my wavelength. And I'm just a white cracker, man, I don't have white privilege because I don't have any wealth. I didn't grow up with any wealth. But I do have white privilege, and since I haven't endured what, black and brown brothers and sisters of mine had, and red and yellow, if you want to use those, color terminology codes that are kind of politically incorrect. But I have empathy. I've always been fascinated with the other, capital O, l'autre, as in the French, the other. And I feel like it really touches me. And see someone like Don McGregor, who is a white man, who wrote arguably the most classic Black Panther run in the early to mid 70s, to two storylines, Panther's Rage and Panther versus the Klan. And then he wrote a sequel storyline in the 80s called Panther's Prey. really, to me, the key Black Panther stories. I mean, more taking the Jack Kirby and Roy Thomas stuff I mentioned to a whole nother level. Like, this guy's got his own comic now. We're going to explore Wakanda. We're going to explore the culture. McGregor created a lot of these characters, like Killmonger and Raymonda, the mother of T'Challa. He did not create W'Kabi. That was a Roy Thomas character, but he seriously developed W'Kabi. And, you know, McGregor is someone who's very in touch with his fandom online, like on Facebook. Don and I are on first name basis. I love him. I consider him a friend, not a close friend or an intimate, but he has said this to me. He's like, don't call me Mr. McGregor, you know, don't shy away, you know, call me Don, you know, I'll call you Henry. We're friends. And I'm like, wow. And this was before the movie came out. And when the movie came out, you know, Don saw the movie. He was invited to the premiere, obviously. He's been invited to the current one, the Wakanda Forever. And, you know, he said he cried when he saw the film. He met Chadwick Boseman shortly after, and there's an incredible picture of them talking across the table at this event or convention or whatever. And it resonated with him. And see, that's the power of these kind of films, this kind of modern mythology, not just the Black Panther, but a lot of comic book and modern mythology kind of related kind of films that are coming out and TV shows where you are translating or adapting these kind of iconic characters and concepts from literature, or be it graphic novels or novels. And it has an incredible effect on people like me who grew up with this source material, and when it was not a part of the huge, greater part of popular culture. So I keep coming back to this. This was the quandary of Ryan Coogler. How do we go forward? Well, they wanted to introduce Namor and their take on the Atlanteans, you know, Marvel's take, and to differentiate it from DC's beat them to the punch with the whole Atlantis thing, sadly. Because I don't particularly care for the film Aquaman or its interpretation of any of that material. I'm not the world's biggest fan of the character Aquaman, but I like him. You know, I think he's fine. I don't think the DCEU, as they call it, don't believe that cycle of films depiction of Jason Momoa as Aquaman has anything really to do with any Aquaman I've ever read. But you know, whatever. You know, it makes women crazy to look at him, and I guess maybe gay men too. I don't know. It makes people, you know, they want to have sex with Jason Momoa, and he's a cool dude, and that's really the key to it. He's just being Jason Momoa. He's being a cool dude / sex symbol. But it doesn't mean to do to me with anything to do with Aquaman storytelling. Yeah, I didn't really like that movie. It was better than Justice League, but so they beat them to that, doing the Atlantis. So Marvel's like, well, okay. So Coogler and company had this cool idea to do it like this, and like I said, it's open-ended enough to where you can interpret it as I depicted it, which is really a critique of colonialism and imperialism, where you have the Aztec Mesoamerican people forced underwater, almost like forced underground, you fleeing from their ravaged, you know, homelands, ravaged by the Spaniards, and literally raped. The Spaniards, you know, they raped the indigenous people of the Americas, literally raped them. That's how you arrive at the ethnic group we call Hispanic or Latinx or Latino, because they're a product of what they used to call miscegenation, which is really more of a racist term of two different races having sex and breeding together. But you know, we're all the same race. I think most smart, intelligent, evolved people have realized that. So miscegenation is kind of a derisive or pejorative term now, but back then, yes, it was kind of believed that. So basically, you know, these Spaniards, you know, and raped these indigenous people, and Their descendants are now the people who, live in Mexico and live in the United States and throughout South America. Just as a lot of people in America, both black and white, have a tremendous amount of Native American blood. I have some Native American blood. I have more Native American blood than Elizabeth Warren, but I don't have enough to claim it like her and try to get, ride on the coattails of it like that idiot did. And so that's one way you look at this Talocan interpretation, adaptation of Atlantis. Another way you can look at it a little more literally. You can look at it as Talocan inspired the mythology of Atlantis, and it was the real Atlantis. So it gets kind of a Farmerian spin to it, the real story behind the published accounts, glorified, legendary accounts. Either way, it's cool. You can see it as in that latter sense, as hewing closer to the comic books, or you can see it as a metaphor for introducing another disenfranchised, non-white race that has advanced technology and culture, and it's been around a very long time, longer than the United States has existed, certainly, and longer than a lot of Europe was settled. So what do you do about these two kingdoms? We'll see. They decided that Talocan/Atlantis has vibranium. So it seems like they should be allies. The original idea, as I understand it, is Namor and T'Challa were going to fight and then become allies. Kind of like has happened in the comic books before between Wakanda and Atlantis. A lot of this was more modern, even though they were characters in the 60s and earlier. Their rivalry in their countries, doing all this intrigue, that's really more modern, last 20 years or so. Really stories initiated by Christopher Priest, writing Black Panther, and later Reginald Hudlin and some other people. So they were going to kind of adapt that angle, and that's kind of cool. It's a way to introduce Atlantis in there. So, as usual with these things, a lot of the plot leaks for Wakanda Forever, depicted the rationale for bringing Namor into Talocan into the story in a way that really wasn't. It didn't really happen in the movie. When you finally see the movie, it's like, no, that's not really what happened. Because nobody really knows, these leaks are notoriously unreliable, and then fan bros speculate. That circulates around the internet, and then that's taken as gospel because ridiculous, stupid companies like Google, the way they run their algorithms, they promulgate and promote these sites, fanbro sites, clickbait sites that have these ridiculous theories that aren't substantiated by facts at all. And then they come up in Google searches and Bing searches and all these other things, and people go, oh my God, so that's what's happening. That's what's going to happen in the new movie, and then when it doesn't happen, the fanbros get kind of bent out of shape that this fan fiction that they basically created was never real. They were just trying to sell it or praying it was real, trying to wish it into existence. So like I've said many times, I despise that subset of fandom with every fiber of my being. So, because I think they sully the reputation of people who enjoy well-done comic book adaptations, movies, and comic books themselves, and even, yes, superhero comic books and movies. They help make it a kind of a dirty thing among intellectual people and people who enjoy film as art and literature as art and comics as graphic novels. And I mean, it does create a prejudice, and I understand it, and for a period of time I even held it, and then I kind of came full circle back once I'd assimilated and realized, the wider scope of the comic book art form beyond Marvel, beyond superheroes. I circled back, and then I could kind of appreciate at a different remove the things about the comic books I grew up with that really were relevant and powerful. And these movies have borne out my feelings. They have really made manifest a lot of these feelings when they're done right and successfully. They haven't always done this. And they haven't recently. They've begun drawing from a different well than the stuff that was in my childhood. You know, stuff like Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk are not really of my time. I mean, She-Hulk is kind of toward the end of my prime time, and I didn't like the character then. I thought then it was kind of a sellout knockoff idea, and the TV show has really kind of been a very faithful adaptation, and has been kind of a shallow knockoff, you know, wannabe kind of, you know, something that's insubstantial to me. And then Ms. Marvel is way after my time. We're talking now Gen Z heroes, you know. But anyway, Wakanda Forever transcends all of this. This is the bottom line. It's taken me forever to get to. What happened in this fucking movie? So let me try to speed this up. So they work in that T'Challa has died of a disease. They don't say what disease. It's like on soap operas, and somebody suddenly gets a fatal disease and just dies. Because they want to write him out and free up their, you know, love interest to meet somebody else. Shuri, of course, is the most brilliant Wakandan and one of the most brilliant minds on Earth. They've established, and she cannot save him. And so this is where they decided to go in this direction and just confront it head on, kill off T'Challa, just like Chadwick died, and just like they had to. They meaning the people who worked with Chadwick and his fans had to cope with this sudden loss, this staggering loss, unexpected, unthinkable. So too does Wakanda have to deal with the sudden, unthinkable death of their protector and hero and king. It's incredible. They pull it off. They really weave it in and they sell it. And most of it is through Shuri. It's really her story as opposed to his story. But it is her story. So Wakanda is ruled upon his death, T'Challa's death, by his mother, now Queen Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, who has a much more substantive and, I guess, to me, a more believable and empathetic role. To me, she was purely a support character in the first film. That's just to me personally. Now, there might be Angela Bassett / Ramonda fans who are going to like hate me for saying this. I just wasn't drawn into her character in the first film at all. I liked her, but I didn't. To me, nothing in the film hinged on her. She was kind of came with the plot device. And again, this may be my prejudice to when I grew up in the comic books, because Ramonda, though created by Don McGregor, came along in the mid to late 80s. So, and she was, in the comic books, she's not T'Challa's mother. She is Shuri's mother by T'Chaka, but not T'Challa's. T'Chaka had several wives or lovers, and he had, I think, 3 or 4, now 4 canonical children. I don't think we'll ever adapt the other 2. Well, Jakara, his half-brother, created by Jack Kirby, the creator of T'Challa and Wakanda, I don't think we're going to see him, unfortunately. But that would be interesting. So, but in this case now he would be the half-brother of Shuri, because T'Challa's gone. So, you know, I immediately thought, well, Shuri, for a time in the comic books, became the Black Panther. So Shuri, herself a very latter-day creation by, I believe, Reginald Hudlin's run on Black Panther in the 2000s. His heretofore unknown sister and daughter of Ramonda and T'Chaka, that she would be the Black Panther. It seemed obvious to me. There was all this, who's going to be the Black Panther? Will there be you know, and this was all hype and misinformation, disinformation, allowed to be promulgated by Marvel and then promulgated to death by Fan Brodom. I just made that word up. And I think Marvel likes playing these kind of games, you know, and letting the fan bros go wild. And then when they disappoint the fan bros, they kind of have their cake and eat it too, because they've already paid the money then, or watched the shows on Disney Plus. They've supported them, even though then they hate them because they're not what they said they were going to be, or they wanted them to be. So Marvel has had the last laugh, and Disney's, you know, laughed all the way to the fucking bank. And so in this case, Wakanda Forever is really, I think it's the most authentic MCU film that's been made. I think there's several things it does have representation and visibility. and it is resonant and authentic. So the film is led by black women, African women. So Shuri, Ramonda, and then of course Nakia returns, played by the insanely gorgeous Lupita Nyong'o. Oh my God! And um, she returns. Her role is not as big as in the last one, but it is very, very key. And her behavior seems strange, and she doesn't really explain it to them why she left around the time of the blip and didn't come back. So they hadn't seen her in 6 years. Apparently she continued after he came back to life, after Endgame, and during Endgame, she continued and actually finally seriously consummated her affair with T'Challa, a kind of a long distance affair. She moved to Haiti, and she did have his son, Toussaint, or also known as T'Challa, Prince T'Challa of Wakanda, as he calls himself in the end. And that's like the end credit sequence. Sorry, spoilers. I spoil everything, so I don't even need to say that anymore. So that explains her behavior early in the movie, why she was away so long, why she was a little not real forthcoming with Shuri. And it's really T'Challa and Nakia had decided kids shouldn't be raised in Wakanda and the pressure of being a prince. And sure, I guess Nakia also wanted to kind of live her own life. Now, I don't know if her and T'Challa were still kind of a long distance couple all the way till his death. So he dies in the beginning, and then a year passes. I'm not sure how the events of Wakanda Forever fit into the MCU timeline. I guess we'll find out when it's on Disney Plus and they add it to that timeline. MCU works arranged by chronological order within the MCU timeline. They have one up now, so I guess we'll find that out when Black Panther Wakanda Forever takes place. My theory, and I'm not saying this as a fan bro speculation, just based on the evidence. I don't wildly speculate, but based on what evidence we have, I would say he came back to life in Endgame. So that's the 5-year bump there. He was dead. Came back, seriously hooked up with Nakia. She had the kid, and I guess they had a long distance romance for a while, maybe a couple of years. Then he died. Then a year passes, and then we get to boom. We're back onto where we are. So, but that's what I thought originally. But when you look at the age of the kid, actually T'Challa and Nakia hooked up between the events of the Black Panther, because they say that's when she left Wakanda, right after the events of the movie The Black Panther. They hooked up immediately then, and they were kind of hinting at the end of the movie. And she moved to Haiti. Then the events of Infinity War happen, and then the blip 5 years, and then Endgame resolution. T'Challa's back to life. So then another year or two passes. So this kid is like, I don't know, somewhere between like 6 and 8 years old. And that makes sense. So from the time the Black Panther film ends to the time we get to the year after his death, I'd say 6-7 years have passed. They said she'd been away for 6 years. So it'd really be longer. 6 years as of the time of his death. So 7 as of the modern. So the son's probably 6 or 7 years old. So it's off to a good start with that, continuing the line. So I guess we'll eventually see this kid grow up and become the next Black Panther. But for now, Shuri has indeed inherited the mantle, but she didn't want it. Her thing was, okay, Ramonda's the queen. I'm the princess, but I'm just going to keep doing my science shit, and I'm just going to keep... She's very bitter. She's very angry. She's very hurt. She's in a bad place. She's not the fun-loving, quippy Shuri of the other previous films, who had that buoyant, effervescent personality. Her hairstyle is much more severe. She's even skinnier than she was in the other movie, very slim and gaunt, which they may just be Letitia Wright's, fashion choices. I don't know if they have anything real bearing on the character, but they add to that feeling. And So her arc is powerful. I loved her character in the other movies. She was really my favorite. In some ways, I liked her character better than the film version of T'Challa. Um, but the other characters to me were just supporting characters. I liked them all, but I didn't have really any investment in Okoye or Ramonda or M'Baku. All of them return in this. I did like W'Kabi, played by Daniel Kaluuya, and unfortunately, from what I understand, the scheduling of his shooting Nope, which I reviewed on this channel, you can check it out, prevented him from being in Wakanda Forever. And I'm like, why didn't they just work around it and do some pickup shots or something? I mean, he was T'Challa's best friend. Where is he? They don't even mention him in this movie. To me, that's the only kind of thing I'm a little annoyed and uneasy about, is his absence and the lack of any plausible explanation or mention of his absence or even existence in this film. It's like, we'll talk about Wakanda. Anyway, that's my only real quibble with this movie, story-wise. I mean, I've been reading so many quibbles and nitpicking. A lot of people love this movie, but a lot of people hate it, and for all these different reasons. And then a lot of people like it, but then they just nitpick it to death. And you probably know from my reviews, I'm not that kind of person. I can be harsh if I don't like something. I can point out all the reasons I don't like it. But if I like something, even if it has some flaws, if it really deeply resonates with me, I will accept it as a whole, as a work. I will overlook subplots or characters or, twists or plot devices that I don't particularly care for or that don't really mean anything to me, as long as they don't conflict with the overall gestalt of the experience, if I'm making sense. In other words, they may not be in service, in my mind, to the greater narrative effectively, but if they don't detract from it in a meaningful way to me, then I'm going to let it slide. And I'm going to be still embrace the work. Now, if asked, I'll say, well, this didn't work, this didn't work. But it's not going to ruin the experience for me. I mean, too many people just immediately, there's one thing they don't like about these films, and then they just dismiss the film. Fuck this, And then the film goes into the internet well, and the consensus reads that this film is garbage, and then it's tainted. It's the cancel culture bullshit. It happened to Ang Lee's Hulk. It happened to Spider-Man 3. It happened to X-Men The Last Stand. And it's seemingly beginning to happen to Thor, Love and Thunder, and even to a lesser extent Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And it's kind of happening to Ms. Marvel and She-Hulk, but deservedly so. Sometimes it's deserved, okay? But a lot of times it's not. Ms. Marvel to me was an unbearable experience to sit through. So I can't really go, oh yeah, I didn't like that about it, but it was still great. No, I can't do it for that. To me, it's not a great work. Also did a video about Ms. Marvel versus the Boys. Check that out if you're interested. As far as two superhero comic book adaptations that came out contemporaneously that are very, very diametrically opposite in every way, meaningful way, and not just opposite as far as one being very adult and one being very kind of remedial. I'm going to trigger Charles again. If I don't shut up, he might attack me on Zoom. But the thing is, it's pandering. It's calculated. It's manipulative stuff. The Boys is just an adaptation, an extension of Garth Ennis's ideas, which are pretty cynical and satirical of the superhero genre. So I contrasted them, and it's not just that they're different in the sense of their audiences or their intentions, but just as a quality of works of art and filmed, art. To me, Ms. Marvel is trash for the most part. Not total trash, but it's mostly trash. And The Boys is not unreservedly brilliant. It had flaws, but I can look over them and go, overall, it's pretty fucking good. So anyway, I really wish more people I know would go see Wakanda Forever. The economy is terrible. Everybody's working all the time. People I know who probably like this movie as much as me or would like it even more have still not had a chance to see it. Now, to be fair, it's only been in theaters not even a week. So I feel like it's been an eternity. I went to see it Thursday. I saw it the very first showing in my part of Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, the southeast side. The theater a mile from me at AMC, Carolina Pavilion, multiplex, 22 screens, and I've seen quite a few films there. I've seen some Fathom Events films there, and I've seen some Marvel movies and some other movies. I've seen some cool movies there, and then they were in limited run. And then I've seen other cool movies at this place called Piper Glen, which is Stonecrest is a shopping center and a community that I work in. So that's a bit away from where I live. There's a highway that bonds us, so it saves me time getting to work. But so that theater has actually shown more exclusives. Even before I worked over there, I went to see like Mandy there, and it's only two screenings it had ever had in in most of North Carolina, anywhere near my county or Charlotte. So I was like thinking this was going to be all sold out months ahead of time. The first Black Panther film, I was not able to see till 3 weeks into it. I didn't move fast or early enough, and all the seats for all of those two theaters were sold out weeks ahead. That was that much buzz and anticipation, and of course it paid off. It really did become a phenomenon, as I've stated endlessly here. Wakanda Forever, there were a few openings here and there the first few days. I was trying to make it work with my work schedule or whatever. Well, coincidentally, with good fortune, I was off work last Thursday. And I had forgotten it was going to premiere on Thursday night, even though I've seen several of these movies when it was possible to see their premiere. Like I saw Thor Ragnarok, one of its first showings on its first night playing on a Thursday before its premiere day Friday. Same with Captain America Civil War. Now, in this case, I found a showing at 3 o'clock. I wanted to go in the evening. I found a showing at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was the very first showing of Wakanda Forever in this whole part of town I live in. And I was like, oh man, does it have any seats? Any good seats? And there was one balcony seat, and I will always sit in the balcony in the F or G rows. And it was a matinee, which I never really get a chance to go to matinees. So it was only $7. The rental price is $14. So I lucked out. I reserved a seat, and boom, 3, 4, or 5 days later, there I was. And there were a lot of bad experiences in the theater, and things that were stressing me out and hurting my anxiety, triggering my anxiety. So it wasn't the best situation, but I had done a little bit of drinking that day, and like I'm doing now. And I'm not a lush, sorry. Don't try it. And that helped. That took some of the edge off, I think. But I really had a great experience. I like to see it again when I have a little more breathing room and a little more, maybe more in the evening. Seeing the first showing was stressful because they wouldn't open the theater until almost 3 o'clock. Whole problem there I won't get into, but it's a very fucking annoying situation and circumstances. Especially since, like I said, I pre-purchased the ticket. But I met some cool people there, and I sat near some really cool people. I was one of the only white people in the audience. I was the only white person on my row. I think there were maybe 3 white people besides me, maybe. That's okay. And I was really happy by the people around me and how much they got the movie and how much it resonated with them. And a lot of this very strong anti-imperialist, anti-UN, implying anti-NATO and anti-USA sentiment. And it was wonderful. It ain't just me, man. I mean, people are sick of this place. They're sick of all this. They're sick of living this kind of life. Wakanda is like a dream. That's why it resonates with them. I've said it before. I'll say it again. It is. It's kind of like Odin said about Asgard in Thor Ragnarok. Asgard is not a place. This is Asgard, and that's the same with Wakanda, and there's when they finally forcefully say the line Wakanda Forever, it's not until near the very end of the movie, and Shuri does it, and it's very powerful. And So I haven't really gotten into what happens in the movie. I guess this isn't going to be that kind of review because I'm running over. I mean, it's pretty simple, really. The CIA decides, well, here's the deal. So the UN confronts Queen Ramonda and Wakanda. And this is after they have sent the CIA and these alphabet agencies, these fucking black ops motherfuckers. They use it, they don't say shield. They say they're real, the real organizations that really exist. And they go in there and they're tipped off to some vibranium underwater, and they try to grab it, and they're slain by these Atlanteans or Telecanil people, these blue-skinned, water-breathing warriors adorned and festooned with Aztec raiment. So we don't see Namor yet, but we see his people, and they're led by two characters we come to learn, just kind of roundabout way, are Atuma, which is a character from the comic books, Atlantean blue-skinned villain, and Namora, who is from the comics also. In the comics, she, though, was white. She was also a half-breed like Namor. But there's also been iterations of Namora where she's blue. She's blue in this. They're blue underwater. They're blue on the surface world. They're brown underwater, which is kind of interesting. But anyway, I think it has to do with their oxygen levels and how it affects their skin. And I think that's the pseudoscience they're trying to apply. And the good thing is they don't sit and spell it all out for you. Shuri, being a brilliant genius, could be like the queen of exposition in this movie, but they don't really. She was in her other appearances, but she's not really used that way in this. But a few times when she is, it's very well done. It's very in keeping with the story. And she has as a foil Okoye, who I think really moves up in my estimation as a character. I mean, a lot of people love that character. I've always liked her, but I've always been like, yeah, Okoye, man. She has some funny lines in the first Black Panther movie. She seemed kind of one note, though. She's supposed to be the cynical fear, She has a lot more dimension in this. I forgot the name of the actor. She plays Danai Gurira. I can't say her name. She plays Michonne on Walking Dead, and she's amazing in this movie. And the chemistry between her and Shuri, played by Letitia, Wright, and because now it's about them. They've inherited this mantle, so they're the main characters. And of course, Queen Ramonda is running Wakanda. So Shuri and Okoye are tasked with finding out what the fuck happened. Why is the CIA coming after Wakanda and accusing them of killing these motherfucking CIA agents? And one of them was played by Robert John Burke, who played RoboCop in RoboCop 3, and also played the eponymous Dust Devil in the great horror film Dust Devil by Richard Stanley, and a friend of mine. And he had a very tiny role, though. I knew he was going to be in it, but yeah, he might as well have been anybody else. So he doesn't last. So the UN confronts them, and Ramonda tells off the UN. She tells them to go fuck themselves in a very, PG-13 friendly way. And it's fierce. And the Dora Milaje, the female warrior guard, they bring in the captured CIA, whatever, SEALs, Black Ops, Blackwater kind of soldier mercenary bullshit. People who tried to harvest the vibranium and were the ones that, because basically there's a retaliatory attack because they decide they're going to go in and get the vibranium from Wakanda since it didn't work out underwater. And they're get their asses kicked by Okoye and the Dora Milaje. And there's a new Dora Milaje character. I can't remember her name. She's kind of a supporting character. She's kind of like newer to the guard, and she's kind of like under the wing of Okoye. And she's kind of a more happy, positive, kind of cheerful character than you see in the Dora Milaje. They're mostly very humorous, stoic, and badass. They don't fuck around. They brought Zemo to his knees in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. which was really a cool. And they deactivated Bucky's cybernetic arm. That's funny. So yeah, they kicked their ass, and I thought they killed all of them, but apparently they left some or maybe all survived, but just wounded them. I don't know. But they drag the ones in they have captured in front of the UN. And so representing the United States in the UN is this character. I don't know the name of the actor or the name of the character, but he's a senator. And he was a character in the Falcon and Winter Soldier series as well. And he was an antagonist to Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. And basically after the blip, the governments of the world were in disarray, during that whole 5 years after the people are gone. So they had to reorganize. And the Falcon and Winter Soldier is the only MCU work that's really, in any meaningful fashion so far, delved into the socio-political, geopolitical situation of Earth, MCU, Earth 616, after the events of the Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, and that 5-year period. I mean, there have been movies that dealt with it on a personal level, like, in the Spider-Man, second Spider-Man movie, and Onward, I guess, but really, and then they've talked about what happened to all which characters got blipped and came back. Like in Black Widow, Yelena Belova was blipped and then came back 5 years later. Didn't know what the fuck happened. But in Falcon and Winter Soldier, they kind of established that, the world is in a different place, and that's why these people, the Flag Smashers, these people who have gotten a hold of the Super Soldier formula, a variant on it, a newly created one, why they have been able to have this revolutionary group led by this character who was a female, kind of a gender-swapped, race-swapped version of Carl Morgenthau, the Flag Smasher from the Captain America comic books. So her name was Carly, and she was a kind of a mixed race makeup, and she was an incredible character and actor, I thought, and a great antagonist for the main characters and potential ally. A lot of great little ideological back and forth between her and Sam. Really, the ideological and the subtextual stuff, or maybe textual stuff in Falcon and Winter Soldier, to me, is the strongest stuff. I talked about that in one of my old episodes of my TV musings thing I used to do, which I decided to ditch it and just review everything under this Blue Review umbrella. Just easier. So that senator, was kind of in the power vacuum, kind of trying to take over and represent the interests of the United States in dealing with Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes and Baron Zemo and all this kind of intrigue that surrounded them. And then, of course, Sam becomes the new Captain America and basically tells the senator to fuck himself in PG-13 friendly terminology. Not as fiercely as Ramonda does. Ramonda tells off the same senator. Apparently, he learned nothing from being verbally bitch slapped by Sam Wilson. And now Ramonda does it. And I think what's going to happen is in Captain America 4, when it comes out, he'll probably be a major character. And he may have to get physically bitch slapped to really finally get it. But he does, in Wakanda Forever, he invokes the president. So there is a president. There's a sitting president who has allowed him to be the representative at the UN. This guy's still a big wig. So American government is reorganizing, reconfiguring. I don't know how deeply they're going to get into this. I hope Captain America 4 will explore all this in detail. And there are some hints from things that I've learned about what's going to happen in it that may indicate it may. I'm not going to say it will and be like a fanbro. So the situation is there was a scientist who created American scientist created the technology to detect vibranium, and that technology fell into the hands of the CIA and these fuckers, and they used it and found the vibranium in Talocan underwater and were killed by the Atlanteans. I'm just going to call them Atlanteans. What the hell? The Thalacamil, whatever. And so they have to find her, because basically some people are wanting to kill her. or they don't even know it's a her. They don't even know who it is. So they find out it's this, you know, new, chick, young prodigy who's just started college, this young African American girl named Riri Williams, and she goes to school in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So Okoye and Shuri go on this little mission and to find her, and byplay between the three of them or interplay is really good. And of course, Riri Williams is a character from the comic books known as Ironheart, and basically she is supposedly like the most brilliant on Earth, like as brilliant as Tony Stark or Shuri. In this movie, it's hard to say. In some ways, they have her upstage Shuri for brilliance. Shuri's actually shocked by some of the things she does. I have to give credit. I have to just theorize that Shuri's emotional state being out of sorts, it's what humbled her to the point where she would be that way. Because I think the old cheery Shuri would have been more, "Hey, come on now, I already know this. What are you talking about, man? Give me a break." I reconfigured Tony Stark's armor designs, in my sleep, baby. But this isn't played that way, and that's fine. So Okoye becomes kind of the humorous foil. So these scenes are kind of reminiscent of the scenes where the Wakandans go to other countries in Black Panther, where you kind of have the scene where they go into the casino. It's almost James Bond-like, T'Challa and Okoye has to wear the stupid wig. Good stuff, and the culture clashes are cool. Riri Williams is very much African American, and she, of course, knows all about Wakanda and the Black Panther, and she's really in awe. And they don't know what to make of each other, so there's a fish out of water thing. But she goes back to Wakanda with them, and they're not going to let her get killed for the shit that happened. And they are, people who want to kill her are basically the Atlanteans. So she comes under the protection of Queen Ramonda, and the Atlanteans attack Wakanda, and they kind of go back and forth in a few different scenarios. You meet Namor. Namor does not want to fight these people. He wants to kind of form an alliance now that he sees Wakanda, and he sees them as being kind of mirrors of each other. As I've said many times before during this video, of how and why they are. Comparison contrast to Talokan and Wakanda. So Namor is like I said, worshipped like a god. They call him Kukulkan sometimes. Of course, he's really not Kukulkan, but and in the comics, he's never been conflated with any Aztec gods. But they imposed that mythology on them, and I think that was a wise move, and I think it was an interesting move because a lot of if you dig in deep into this kind of stuff like Edgar Cayce in Search of Atlantis, and Edgar Cayce's one, The Sleeping Prophet, his book on Atlantis is amazing. He may have made it all up, but it's still fascinating. And a lot of those kind of accounts have, the ancient astronauts kind of stuff, the kind of stuff that Jack Kirby was into when he created the Eternals, and a lot of his concepts go back to these ideas that ancient Atlantis sank, and these survivors of Atlantis spread across the continents and seeded the world, the races, and so the most advanced races like Aztecs, Toltecs, Mayans, and Egyptians, etc., Mesopotamians, Sumerians, they were all kind of spawn of Atlantis, so that's why they were so much more advanced for their time. And that idea has been used in a lot of different things, and of course that whole ancient astronauts and the idea, it was really popular in the 70s, and this kind of stuff was discussed in Chariots of the Gods, the book, and the movie by Eric von Daniken. That popularized a lot of it. That's kind of what got Kirby going on doing the Eternals. And I did a whole video about that called We Need to Talk About the Eternals. I did it before the film came out. And Battlestar Galactica, what differentiated it from Star Wars, which it was very obviously influenced by, and Star Wars opened the gates for it to exist. Battlestar Galactica, was the most expensive television show of all time when it came out. It was $1 million per episode, and it opened with this, voiceover by Patrick Macnee, who later played a character on the show called Cantabile, and they never state whether it's supposed to be Cantabile narrating. But it's like, it talks about how, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, the Mayans, these advanced races, and they, I guess made contact or influenced by or were parallel to other extraterrestrial races. And he ends it by saying, there's still those who believe there are brothers of man, scattered across the stars or whatever. And the Battlestar Galactica leads a ragtag fugitive fleet on a journey for a shining star known as Earth. So then there are 12 colonies, and each of the colonies is named after a zodiac symbol. I've always thought the original Battlestar Galactica, regardless of its execution and its limitations, conceptually was powerful, and to me, much stronger than Star Wars. I'm just going to say it resonated with me personally. It had a mystical element, and unfortunately, a lot of that was not explored in the reboot series. Some of it was. It was a struggle to get through that series, though, because it was really disappointing to see something that had that much harder of an edge and a modern allegorical kind of slant to it, that had the opportunity to really mine the heavy shit subtext beneath the original show, and hit it a few times, hit around it. I don't know, but that could be a whole nother video. But anyway, so that's where I think these ideas about Atlantis and all, it all fits together, really. It really, Atlantis and, it all makes sense. So to do Talocan as Atlantis totally makes sense to me, and visually it's beautiful. Visually, this whole film is beautiful. The costumes are as beautiful, if not more beautiful, than the first film. The soundtrack of the first one was very cool, one of the very best Marvel ones. They're not really known for great soundtracks, in my opinion. And this one is way stronger. It is amazing and really very authentic, yet very modern. Very kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say the music's Afrofuturist like the concepts or the visuals, but it hits a lot of notes with me. I mean, there's one instrumental passage. Well, it has some like non-lyrical vocals, and it reminds me the melodies and stuff. It reminds me a lot of Ali Farka Touré, incredible African guitarist and singer, who's with his own very emblematic style. And he did an incredible album with Ryan Coogler called slide guitar player Ryan Coogler, and called, I think, something like something to Timbuktu, leaning to Timbuktu, slouching towards Timbuktu. I got it wrong, but Timbuktu is the title. But it's evocative of that idea, And it's just an amazing album. And his solo stuff, Ali Farka Touré, he's one of the great. I think he's really one of the great, ethnic musicians walking the planet, and one of the great guitarists with some of the most distinctive sound. Some of this music reminded me of his stuff. I mean, I really think the music was strong. The visuals accompanying the kind of wake or whatever of T'Challa after he dies is just breathtaking. The movie moves at a really good pace. A lot of people are complaining about the length, just like they will be about this video, and I don't blame you. But to me, it's like, I don't need to take an hour and a half talking about this movie. I really shouldn't do this. I'm very self-indulgent, but it's my channel, damn it. So people are like, why do you need 2 hours and 40 minutes to do this? Well, why do they need 3 hours to do Endgame, damn it? I mean, why not? 2.5 hours. Wasn't Doctor Strange 2.5 hours? I mean, this is getting to be standard. No Marvel movie is going to be under 2 hours. And rarely you're going to see one under 2 hours and 15 minutes. I loved it. So the way it unfolds, essentially, Shuri manages to synthesize the heart-shaped herb and decides that she's going to become the new Black Panther. But her motivations are kind of tinged by anger and revenge, because Ramonda is killed during a flooding by Namor of the Wakandan capital, and Ramonda saves Riri Williams, but she herself dies. Namor didn't really want to go to this extent, but it's some heavy political stuff going on between these two races and cultures, and So she decides to acquire this power of the Black Panther and mantle to destroy Namor. And like T'Challa says in Civil War, when he finally confronts Sparen Zemo, who killed his father, he's like, I will not let myself be eaten by revenge as you have. And unfortunately, Shuri does let herself get that way. And so they have a big battle, and she holds her own. But, Namor is strong as fuck. They really haven't skimped on his powers or his abilities from the comics. It's very comics accurate. Underwater, he's just about invincible. He can go toe to toe with the Hulk. And M'Baku even says, half jokingly, that he's as strong as the Hulk. Now, they do the same thing they did in the comics. They trap him in the ship. They drain the moisture and heat it up, and he starts to lose his power, his strength, and gets sick. That doesn't last very long, but it was cool to see all these different concepts. It was nice to see they addressed everything they needed to with the repercussions of Boseman / T'Challa's death. They took the concepts further. They developed the characters further. They gave visibility and representation to all these black females, these strong, beautiful black females. And then they introduced the Atlanteans, and you have a whole nother culture. And you have the Huerta, the guy who plays Namor, Hispanic man who's again, now is creating a visual of representation, like I said. And I don't think this is done in a crass, cynical, neoliberal, pandering way. To me, it's done in a creative, passionate, authentic, cultural way, if that makes sense. So there's no need to even get into the end of the movie. I already told you the spoiler. They find out about T'Challa and Nakia's kid. Spoiler, Namor does not die. Shuri does not kill him. And they have kind of a truce. And when Namor returns to Tenoch, with this news, he's pleased with the fact that Shuri maybe not forgave him, or maybe forgave him, but not forgot, but, allowed that truce to be, because she kind of was going the dark route, but then she became more like what T'Challa would do. Now, the way they epitomize the dark route is when she takes the outer-shaped herb, as I mentioned earlier, she communes with the ancestors. She has this astral visitation, this mystical rite. And she doesn't meet Ramonda or T'Chaka or T'Challa. She meets Eric Killmonger. So Michael B. Jordan's back, and he's incredible, and he's wearing all white. And he's, again, he's talking like, this kind of street smart dude from the hood, but he's laying it out, and he's, basically saying when the time comes, you're going to be like your brother and go all noble, or you're going to be about getting the business done. I'm mildly paraphrasing, but that's pretty much what he said. And he's incredible. He is captivating, and there were some audible gasps around me when he came on screen. Some people probably knew he was going to appear. I had heard the rumor he might, but I wasn't sure, again. And some people, I think, did not know he was going to appear, and there's a black girl right next to me, and when he appeared, she cried at all the same marks in the movie I cried, and she was a fan of the Ironheart character in the comics. She was like, oh, man, they got Riri Williams right, man. And I'm, I don't follow that stuff. And I was like, that's kind of cool. That's important, because that generation has its characters like Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, and if they are comic accurate, that's one plus. And then we get to go to the part, are they artistically well rendered? And that's a whole other argument. But I think Riri Williams, what little I know of the character from the comics, she seems authentic, and she was well rendered. And her Iron Man armor is kind of cool. It looks stupid and cheesy in the previous shots that are low def. But she looks more like a Transformer or the Iron Patriot. But no, it actually looks pretty cool. And they didn't overuse her, and they didn't underuse her. They basically got her just about right in a good supporting slot. Kind of like America Chavez in Doctor Strange. But she's a little more integral characterization-wise to Wakanda Forever than America Chavez. America Chavez was integral to the story because of her origin and her powers, But she did have the subplot with the two lesbian mothers, so that was kind of cool, and that was right from the comic book. So fans of that character should also be happy. So I'm not begrudging the newer generation of characters, their fans, the resonance and joy that I get from seeing the older characters well realized. Just because I'm not into those characters that much, and that those comics are just stuff I don't enjoy or are interested in. That doesn't invalidate the characters, because if they're well rendered on screen, then to me that's improving the characters. I've thought that about a lot of these movies, that they've actually improved the characters from the comics. Uh, some of them have managed to translate beautifully and improve. Like, to me, the X-Men, best X-Men films and Daredevil series are great examples. To me, I feel those properties have come to life, but at the same time, they have made them more adult, more modern, given them more of an edge, more plausibility, story-wise, more verisimilitude. I can't say this for all the MCU stuff, though, unfortunately. But I will say, in this film, they succeeded. Even though Black Panther, that we know T'Challa is not in the movie, they succeeded with the Wakanda concept. And that's really what it is, that whole concept. And of course, the Black Panther being the icon, the totem of Wakanda. And then you finally have a new Black Panther at the end, who obviously was going to be Shuri. I don't know why anyone thought otherwise. And then Namor is realized on screen. Namor and the surrogate Atlantis, Talocan. And beautifully, I think this is going to be an important, strong, wonderful character. He really acts just like Namor. This conflicted, kind of this dark, mean, cruel, cynical, by any means necessary kind of side, and then this kind of, all right, well, fair enough, let's talk this out as civilized people, almost this kind of Shakespearean, dramatic figure, and very regal. Huerta, from watching interviews with him, he's a great actor, because he's not really, I don't think he is fluent in English, and he has a very strong accent. He has trouble sometimes thinking of the right words in interviews, and that's fine. It's not his native language, but he renders English perfectly in this, and he's on, man. Just like Tony Young did with the Mandarin. That's what happens when you get great actors, man. They act. And they can portray someone speaking another language convincingly, even though they don't even know what they're saying. Maybe. But anyway, I'm going to fold this up. Now I've hit the hour and a half. So hopefully this will be my last MCU or superhero comic related thing for a while yet. I broke with Werewolf by Night, but I thought for good reason, it being Halloween. And I went over my big mark. This has gone longer than my last longer video, which was I believe my Manson video. I don't count the live stream, the Dawn of the Dead, because that was intended to be long and open-ended. So I want to go ahead and make some announcements. So I made a community page, like I mentioned earlier. So I'll make announcements for future videos there and tease things. I also put like pictures and like things I'm interested in, maybe links to other things on YouTube that I want y'all to see. Just anything of interest to me that I think might be of interest to people I know who subscribe and what they're into. It's a broad range of things. You can cover music, film, comics, politics, whatever, but it's going to be on there. So this makes me feel better. I can maybe be in touch with and interact with my subscribers. And I'm hoping to eventually, obviously, get to the 1,000 subscriber mark and be mildly monetized. Not just because I want to make a little tiny bit of money, because that's all I'll make is a tiny bit of money, but because I want to be able to do stuff like live streams and have people, more than like one or two people, attend and interact and experience things more in real time and as a community. I don't know if it will happen, but I'm giving you all a heads up. I went ahead and put a poll on my community page. If I do another live stream, will you attend? Yes, no, maybe, or you don't have enough of a following yet to do a live stream. I've only got one person who said yes. So I'm at 100% yes, but I only have one person. So check that out. Let me know, because I do have tentative plans to do a live stream for Thanksgiving. and it'd be an epic one, like the Dawn of the Dead one. They're very, very different kinds of film materials than Dawn of the Dead, but that's okay. It's a different kind of occasion. I don't personally observe Thanksgiving in any kind of spiritual or socio-political or holiday, holiday festivity kind of way. I don't observe it. I don't celebrate it. But I do have some rituals that I do observe every year, and I covered one of them last year. So if I do a live stream on Thanksgiving, it's going to be an extension of those rituals. That's all I'm going to say. So I'm going to kick off this. That's kickoff is when you start something. I'm going to wrap up this episode. Somebody buy these damn cuddly guys. I need money. So anyway, Star Sapphire and I are signing off. We're going to drink some booze and chill. Thank you to all my patrons, my dear friends and supporters, these wonderful people like Sean Lee Levin and Tim Tolbert, Tim McLean and Shelley Druckreich and Amy Green and Mick Cantone and Dwayne Cochran and Terry Mulford and Drew Dahmer. And if anybody wants to be a channel patron, please feel free. You can contribute money to my PayPal address. You can contribute review materials. I'll let you know what I need, or you can tell me what you want me to review. And I'll eventually get around to reviewing it. I promise. Still have a little backlog I need to do, and I apologize for the ones I'm behind on. Thank you. Rock on. Take care, and Wakanda forever.